History is shaped by moments. Moments when the fate of nations, and even the world, can shift in the blink of an eye. In these times, everything hangs in the balance, and the world seems to hold its breath, waiting for what comes next. The year 1983 was one such moment, a turning point when the Cold War, already simmering for decades, nearly erupted into open conflict. Tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union reached their highest point since the Cuban Missile Crisis, with both superpowers locked in a dangerous game of brinkmanship. President Reagan's confrontational policies, including his famous Evil Empire speech and the unveiling of the ambitious Star Wars missile defense program, sent shockwaves through the Kremlin and the world. Soviet leaders, led by the deeply suspicious Yuri Andropov, interpreted these moves as clear signs that the West was preparing for a possible first strike, fueling their own fears and suspicions. Both sides responded by pouring unprecedented resources into new weapons and military technology, each convinced that the other was preparing for war, and each action escalating the cycle of mistrust. Europe became the front line of this standoff, with NATO and Warsaw Pact forces staring each other down across a divided Germany, the threat of conflict looming over every border. Ordinary people lived with the daily fear of nuclear war. Children practiced drills in classrooms, families built fallout shelters, and grim public service announcements became a part of everyday life. The machinery of war was primed and ready. A single mistake, a misunderstood signal, or a false alarm could have triggered catastrophe on a global scale. In 1983, the world was holding its breath, anxiously watching as events unfolded, uncertain if peace would hold or if disaster was just around the corner. The peace that had lasted for decades felt more fragile than ever, as millions hoped and prayed that cooler heads would prevail. All it would take was one miscalculation, one moment of panic or misunderstanding to change history forever and plunge the world into darkness. 1983 was a year of near misses, moments when the world seemed to hold its breath, teetering on the edge of catastrophe. Tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union reached a fever pitch, and every headline seemed to hint at the possibility of disaster. Each incident, no matter how small, pushed the world closer to the brink. The atmosphere was thick with suspicion, and the smallest spark could have set off a global inferno. President Ronald Reagan's Evil Empire speech and the announcement of the Strategic Defense Initiative sent shockwaves through Moscow. To Soviet leaders, these moves looked like clear signs that the US was preparing for a first strike, escalating the arms race to new heights. In September, tragedy struck when a Soviet fighter jet shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007, killing all 269 people on board. The world watched in horror as relations between the superpowers plunged to a new low, and the sense of danger became almost palpable. Paranoia ran high on both sides. Every military movement, every radar blip, was scrutinized as a possible prelude to nuclear attack. The fear of a surprise strike haunted military planners and civilians alike. Then, on the night of September 26th, a Soviet officer named Stanislav Petrov faced a moment that could have changed history forever. His early warning system suddenly reported that several US missiles had been launched toward the Soviet Union. The alarms blared and the pressure to respond was immense. Protocol demanded immediate retaliation, but Petrov hesitated. Trusting his instincts and reasoning, he reported it as a false alarm, a malfunction in the system. His decision averted what could have been a nuclear holocaust. The world never knew just how close it came to annihilation that night. The story would remain hidden for years. Only weeks later, in November, NATO's Able Archer 83 exercise simulated nuclear launch procedures with a realism that alarmed Soviet intelligence. The Soviets believed it might be a cover for an actual attack. In response, the Soviet Union put its nuclear forces on the highest alert, ready to launch at a moment's notice. The world was closer to war than most people ever realized. For days, the world teetered on the edge, with leaders on both sides unsure if the next move would be their last. Only years later, with the release of declassified documents, did the public learn just how seriously Moscow took the threat, and how close we all came to disaster. The smallest misstep, a single misunderstanding, could have triggered the unthinkable: nuclear war on a global scale. 1983 was a year when the world's fate truly hung by a thread, and the shadow of nuclear annihilation loomed over every decision. In the end, it was only luck, and the courage and judgment of a few individuals that kept the peace and gave the world another chance. Imagine if luck had run out. During Able Archer, a Soviet radar station detects an anomaly, perhaps a flock of birds, perhaps a glitch. In the climate of fear, it's mistaken for an American EMP attack. The Kremlin, gripped by panic, authorizes a limited preemptive nuclear strike on NATO command centers in Europe. Their hope shocked the West into backing down. Instead, NATO sees it as the opening salvo of a full-scale nuclear war. Retaliation is immediate and overwhelming. Missiles launch from silos and submarines targeting Warsaw Pact military sites. The war everyone feared begins, not by design, but by a fatal miscalculation. The world changes in minutes. The nuclear nightmare has begun. War erupts in Europe with unimaginable ferocity. The first nuclear strikes target military bases, not cities, yet devastation is total. NATO and Warsaw Pact forces clash in the ruins of Germany, fighting amid radioactive fallout. Communications collapse. Chaos reigns. Soviet troops surge west, hoping to overwhelm battered NATO defenses. Sea battles rage in the North Atlantic while fighting spreads to the Mediterranean and beyond. Soldiers and civilians alike face a nightmare of radiation, fire, and terror. Tactical nuclear weapons are used to break stalemates, blurring the line between conventional and nuclear war. The rules of war vanish. Survival becomes the only goal. Europe is transformed into a wasteland. The world is on fire. The initial strikes are only the beginning. As chaos spreads, commanders on both sides fear losing their remaining nuclear arsenals. The logic of use them or lose them prevails. A second, larger wave of nuclear missiles is launched, this time targeting cities. New York, Moscow, London, Paris, obliterated in moments. Firestorms consume entire cities. Fallout poisons the land and air. Survivors face a world without government, medicine, or hope. The sun is blotted out by smoke and ash, plunging the planet into nuclear winter. Temperatures plummet, crops fail, and darkness spreads. Civilization collapses in hours. The war that lasted a day dooms the world for generations. There are no victors, only survivors. The planet itself is scarred beyond recognition. In the aftermath, survival is a daily struggle. Every day brings new uncertainty as people search for the bare essentials: food, water, and shelter in a world that has been turned upside down. Cities are silent tombs. The countryside is filled with desperate refugees. Families are forced to leave everything behind, wandering in search of safety that no longer exists. Radiation sickness and starvation claim millions. Hospitals are overwhelmed, and the most vulnerable, children and the elderly, suffer the most. Society unravels. No law, no order, no help. Looting and violence become common as people fight for survival in a world where the rules have vanished. Trust vanishes. Communities become isolated and defensive. Neighbors turn into strangers, and fear shapes every interaction. Soldiers, cut off and sick, become either protectors or predators. Some try to maintain order, while others exploit the chaos for their own gain. The environment collapses. Nuclear winter brings famine and mass extinction. The sun is blotted out, and the land grows colder and more barren with each passing day. Even untouched countries suffer as crops fail and ecosystems die. The global food supply collapses and hunger spreads across continents. Billions perish. Humanity teeters on the brink. The scale of loss is unimaginable, and the world is left in mourning. The war strips away decency, leaving only fear and hunger. Acts of kindness become rare, replaced by desperation and suspicion. The world is thrown into a new dark age. Technology and progress are lost, and people cling to survival in the shadows of what once was. The War of 1983 is lost by all. No nation is spared, and the symbols of power lie broken and forgotten. The scars, physical and psychological, will last for generations. Children inherit a world of trauma, and memories of peace fade away. The lesson: in nuclear war, there are no winners, only devastation, and a warning for all who come after. In this alternate 2025, the world is unrecognizable. A few 100 million survivors cling to life, mostly in the southern hemisphere. The great cities of the north are radioactive ruins. Technology and society have regressed by centuries. Life is hard, local, and primitive. New societies form around scarce resources. Old ideologies are meaningless. The planet is wounded, climate altered, species extinct, radiation lingering. The sky is different, the ozone layer is shattered. Reflecting on this nightmare, we see how close we came. The Cold War's peaceful end was not inevitable. It was a miracle of restraint, luck, and human judgment. The only winning move in nuclear war is not to play.